faces, but some new ones as well. So my name is Debbie Stine, and I am a independent consultant, and I also run the Science Technology Policy Academy, which I started this summer after all the workshops I used to do went from in person to online. And it's been really interesting. As I'm very happy that so many people have been interested in learning more about science and technology policy. So once a month, we've been holding a webinar. This is the second one. Our last one was on international science technology diplomacy. The videos of these do go online on the Science Technology Policy Academy YouTube page, and also the slide decks that I used today will also be posted on our webpage. So don't worry about not getting them at some point if you're interested. As background, in terms of like, how did I get involved or know about sort of presidential transitions? Well, it started when I was at the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and working with the presidents of the academies through several administrations. I did the transition papers, the white papers is what they're typically called, for, let me see, I think 3 different presidential administrations. And basically what those white papers did is they said, okay, well, here's some of the Academy reports. Here's the topics that we think you should emphasize. And these are the actions that you should take. And so it's very common for think tanks, NGOs, all these folks to put out white papers as we transition to a presidential administration. Then I also worked on 2 reports that were on specifically science and technology presidential appointments. This is also when I was at the National Academies. And there I was, the committees were made up almost entirely of former science technology presidential appointees. And so I learned also a great deal from them about the process and how it worked. Then after I left the National Academies, I went to the Congressional Research Service, and I wrote reports, including one about the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy in preparation for the transition. And amazingly, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 months later after I wrote this paper, I got hired to work for OSTP as the executive director of the President's Council of Advisors on Science Technology for the first 3 years of the Obama administration. And one thing you really learn at the beginning of an administration, it is very chaotic. I do not think, I started on July 6th, and we met with the president for the first time on, I believe, August 8th. And during that time period, that 1 month, we produced our first report, which was on H1N1, which seems sort of interesting now that we are again back in sort of the concerns about a pandemic. And we held our first PCAST meeting and held our first committee meeting with experts on the topic. So at the beginning of the administration, I was the only person who was working on PCAST. So I had to organize all these meetings. I had, work with the committee members to put together a report. And then also we put together a document so that when we met with President Obama, it would have, and the PCAST members did this. They had been working for quite a while saying, these are sort of the topics that we want, that we think you might be interested in, that are related to your priorities. And we presented that to the president at our first meeting, and he looked through them and he picked out the first couple that actually became the first reports that we worked on for PCAST on what were his top priorities. And the one thing I will say in working in the White House that you learn really quickly is time is of the essence. That it's not like in Congress, you kind of think you kind of maybe drift there for a very long period of time. Each congressional session is only 2 years. But in the White House, you know that, you definitely only have 4 years, of which in reality, you only have 3 years, because it takes, like, say, 6 months to get started. And then there's really not much you can do during your last 6 months. And you do not know if you're going to be reelected. And so you're also sort of campaigning, like a lot of the top people are campaigning at the same time. So it can be a very challenging time. So I'm going to sort of go through like what I have learned. So here's some sort of basic rules, which the first is you should know, as I mentioned earlier, this session is being recorded. So if you don't want your face to show, then you should not show it. However, I do not like talking to a bunch of black boxes. So therefore, if you are willing to have your video on, I do greatly appreciate it. So thank you for the 4 or 5 people who do have their video on, and I see others popping up. Thank you very much. If you can thank you. And if you can stay on mute, that's great. But do put your questions in the chat box. And then when we get to sort of the time for questions, I will call upon you to ask those questions. So does everybody get the ground rules? Any other thoughts? Okay, so let us go. So I decided to kind of break this up into the 3 Ps. I'm very fond of breaking things up into 4 Es, 3 Ps, all these different things. So this is the 3 Ps, which is people, policy, and politics. And those are what I'm going to talk about as we go through this presentation. So the first thing I'm going to show is I'm going to show an excerpt from a movie. I presume some of you know who that is, as in Robert Redford. It's from a movie called The Candidate, which I'm sure came out well before 95% of you here were born. But it's a good movie, and I'm going to hope that it works when I press it. Let's see here. Yep. Okay, let's try this. Let me try this way. So it did work when I tried it. But if not, I will switch over to YouTube. Hold on a second. Oh, I know, I see. I figured out what the problem is. Okay, great. Okay. So it's one, of course, those security errors. There we go.
We're going to clear the hall. Be just a couple of minutes.
I'll help you.
No, you split a little while ago.
Son, you're a politician.
Just so as a brief mention here, so this Robert Redford is a senator who just found out in a very tight race that he has been elected president of the United States.
No, we're ready. Here he comes.
Okay, well, now. I want to talk to you.
Hold on.
Well?
Hey, you
guys not supposed to be here. Okay, we've got about 60 seconds of privacy before they find out we're here now. So what's on your mind, Senator?
I don't know.
Okay, we gotta get out there. See, I told you they'd be here.
Marvin, what do we do now?
Wait a minute, what?
Okay, so that is what it's like to be part of a presidential transition from the moment that you're elected. And so when you think about all the things I'm going to talk about, I want you to think about the person on the other side and what it's like for them. And that is what it's like. And it's not just the president, but it is everybody who begins to get nominated for all the cabinet positions, the White House positions, anything else, is they're inundated with people who are all like wanting something.
We're going to clear the hall.
Sorry. So, so here is there's actually an organization that studies presidential transitions and tries to make them better. And I'm going to give you some of the overviews, from their transition document as to what it is that they recommend. So these are what needs to happen, basically, like right now in the transition time period. First, they have to staff the White House and the executive office of the president, because they got to have somebody to sort of do the work. That just happened like in the past week or so. They have to make more than 4,000 presidential appointments, and 1,200 of those require Senate confirmation. They have to figure out what the situation is on more than 100 federal agencies, and they have to organize a leadership team for each one to look at each and provide feedback back to those who are going to be appointed for those offices. They have to build a policy platform, based on what it is that they promised. And then there's this magic period that you're going to start to hear about called the first 100 days. So supposedly, each new president that comes in has 100 days to make its like biggest impact. It's kind of like the honeymoon time period. Now, whether or not President-elect Biden gets a honeymoon period, I do not know. But typically, that's the goal. The goal is to see what can you accomplish on the policy front in 100 days. So one of the things that's really important to also understand about presidential transitions is the presidential transition does not start on the day that you're elected until the day you're inaugurated. It actually really is about a 1-year transition period, because people start working on the transition before they even know if they're going to be elected. And the time it takes for a Senate confirmation of all these candidates can take like another year. So keep in mind that when people are talking about presidential transition, it's not just like 2 or 3 months. So here is sort of an overview of what happens. So we're sort of in the pre-election stage, where, during the pre-election stage, they develop a promise book. So one of the things I was asked to do, for example, during one transition, was to look at all the promises that were made during the campaign on science and technology and see what was the status of those? Did they get, did something happen with them? Did something not happen with them? So forth. Then they have to figure out the urgent policy issues, and they have to develop the budget submission for the next fiscal year. So those of you who've heard about the budget process knows that the budget process works well ahead of time. So usually the State of the Union is in January, the president's budget, which previews the president's budget submission, which is in February, and then the hearings go after that. Now, in reality, all this stuff sometimes these days takes longer, but that's the goal. Then, you have all these, like, this is kind of more detailed milestones for the first phase. Again, now we're in the agency review teams, which I'm going to talk about a bit later, and selecting the personnel, and just getting everybody to figure out like what the heck is going on. So then the priority is to fill the top 100 Senate confirmed positions. I, by the way, looked at this list today, and guess what? It doesn't include anybody. It doesn't include the White House Office of Science Technology Policy, or just about any other scientific role. And then, yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I had a really quick question. So the previous slide you were showing how part of the process is training Sherpas, the fourth step, and I was wondering what that actually refers to.
I have absolutely no idea. I presume it's the people who are going to be carrying around information related to the agency. So they get these humongous briefing books. So like, hey, say all of a sudden your secretary, you've been nominated to be Secretary of Energy. Well, you got a lot to learn. So I'm assuming that's what they mean, but I don't know. I'll have to look that up. So it's a good question. Let me go back. Oh yeah. Yeah. So again, we have the confirmations, those you'll start to see confirmation hearings, probably beginning in February, with the hope that to get particularly all the cabinet officials in place. But of course, all these people have to have security clearances. It can take, see, like here, Obama submitted 150, 200 names 4 to 6 weeks prior to the election, because it takes that long to get even the basic level of clearance. I myself went through this clearance process, and for those of us who are on the lower end of the spectrum, it took about a year. So these are what they call non-competitive positions. So the PAS ones are the ones requiring Senate confirmation. Then you have the ones without Senate confirmation, and then the non-career senior executive service and the confidential or policy determined positions that are at or below that. So, so as you're kind of like going down the spectrum now, like for example, in science and technology, one big question is, do you want Senate confirmation or do you not want Senate confirmation? Senate confirmation is considered to be like you're a higher being, but on the other hand, it takes long. So I remember, I don't know if some of you know Millie Dresselhaus from MIT, and she for like the last year of, I can't even remember which administration it was. I think maybe the Clinton administration. So she was nominated to be the director of the Office of Science. And it took her almost a year to get through the process. And she was then only in the office for a year because of the Senate confirmation. So sometimes people think, do we really want these for the science technology appointments or do we not? Then you have these people, see the Schedule Cs. That's what I was. I was a Schedule C. So I was not part of the political campaign or anything else. I was just picked, and they asked me, do you want a political appointment or do you want a non-political appointment? And I said non-political, and that is because there's rules, ethics rules and things like that prevent you from, say, burrowing in. So basically having a political appointment, and then as you see the administration coming in, try to become a regular civil service. That civil service positions are competitive. These positions are not competitive. In other words, the president has the right to choose these people without like going through an interview process or, like for federal positions, it's a very complex process with different applications and then multi-level interviews and all these different things. Here, obviously you're interviewed for the position, but it's not the level of competition and level of paperwork and all these other things that you have to do for a competitive position, a GS position. So now we're getting toward the people stage. So there's two books that you'll hear about. The first one on the left is called the Plum Book. The Plum Book is something that is issued every, let me see, 4 years, I believe. And what it is it lists all the top positions, all these political positions that were in place at that time. So if you're somebody who is like a political person and you're looking for a position and you want to know what the status is, like the name of the position, if it requires Senate confirmation, doesn't require Senate confirmation, so forth, this is the place that you look. I had the link to it down here. You can look at it for free online. And, you know, like I said, it has all those thousands of positions that I talked about before. Now, the one that's on the other side called the PRUN book, this is part of a series of books that was put out quite a while ago by the Council for Excellence in Government. And what this book does, it didn't do it just for science and technology, but obviously I'm picking the one because of science and technology jobs. What it did is it described the position, you know, like almost as a, you know, like you see a job description for like any sort of job. Well, that's basically what it did. It talked about the challenges, who had the job before, who had the job after, you know, all sorts of different different things. Let me see. Yes. So we have a question here. Well, I tell you what, I'm going to continue on, and then I think I'll go back to the questions. I think that's probably the best way to do it. Okay. So now the other thing you need to understand is that this is like a hierarchical kind of activity. So if you are, say, like one of these assistant secretaries, if somebody asks you to take on that position, you kind of want to know who the Secretary of Education is that you're working for. And if you're the Secretary of Education, then you want to have control over who is the assistant secretaries that are below you, because they're the ones who'll be implementing your ideas and so forth. So what this does is it kind of gives a hierarchy, and it shows, you know, in terms of the time frame, that the Obama administration did the Secretary of Education first, and then it was like 2 months, and then they identified these candidates, and then went down. So that what this group is recommending is that these people be appointed in batches. But the important part from your perspective, if like you're thinking, okay, oh, I'd kind of like to work in this administration, is to understand that the people who are at the lower levels, like we would be, don't get hired for political positions because those people are not in place or confirmed, right? So that means that there's this kind of delay in the process. So right now, the focus during this time period is only on those very top level people, the people who work for the White House directly, the people who are the cabinet secretaries and heads of the major agencies, because those are the ones who are most important to have in place before you can do anything else. So for example, in my case, the Obama administration was the first who really identified who would be the director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, which is officially the assistant to the president for science technology. That's the political side. And the co-chairs of PCAS, which they picked 2 people, Harold Varmus, who is a Nobel Prize winner, used to be head of NIH, and Eric Lander, who's head of the Broad Institute in Boston. So all those people were in place or identified in December, and that was like the earliest it had ever been done. In fact, it was even on The Economist. There was this cool like picture of them because it was so unusual. I suspect that the Biden administration will do the same thing. They will identify who those people are early, and that's important because for all those people those 60-some people for all those scientific positions, They want to know not only who the head of the agency is, but who is going to be the White House, the president's science advisor. So that's sort of one other thing that's important to know. So this is from the Biden transition page, and so right now, today, you can go to this page, and this is an application. But you can see here, this form is meant for applicants interested in serving in political appointments in the Biden-Harris administration. For career opportunities, please visit USA Jobs. Thank you for your interest. So in reality, it was, let me see, last Friday, that people who were active in the campaign, people who were active in the Obama administration, I'm sure like other groups, were asked to put in an application with the form that you'll see on this page to see if they were, to express their interest in working through the administration. So the bottom line here is to understand that it doesn't like hurt to fill out that application, but keep in mind it's for those 4,000 political positions. And if you didn't work in the campaign, or if you don't have a tie, it's unlikely that you'll do stuff. But hope is not lost. And I'm going to talk about that a bit further. So here's the USA Jobs website. And I just looked at this today to say, okay, like what is happening? So here, the White House is officially the executive office of the president. Here is one, and I picked this because I know that I've had some students that know about this stuff. So here it is for policy analysts in public health working in the White House, looking about the use of illicit drugs and prescription drugs, and talks about opioids and all those things for you health folks out there. And you can apply for this today. It's a good job, good pay, and it's a permanent position, which means that like, for example, I was a term position. It was 3 years. In fact, I had to negotiate up. They said 2 years initially, and I said I wanted to have 3 years to get close to the next administration. And so this is better for like a longer term career path than probably a political position. So here's another one that I thought would be, which is also policy analyst. This is in the Office of Management Budget, and this is from OIRA. For those of you who attended the benefit cost workshop I did a few weeks ago, that's Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. And you'll see here that, this is, the office in the, within the Office of Management and Budget that works on all sorts of issues that are of interest to the science technology policy. So this is, like another sort of position that, again, you can apply for today. Then there are also these student trainee positions. And those positions are not only here, but like throughout the government. So even if you're a student currently today, you could apply for these positions. Now, here's an advantage, like always, like say, well, is there anything good about the pandemic? Well, one thing good about this is that this position is a remote position. And so you don't have to like move to Washington to get it. And then here's some other ones. This is the White House internship program. So I have seen, I met, scientists, in fact, one from my engineering alma mater, which is UC Irvine, who were part of the White House internship program. Now, this is separate from the OSTP program, which I'm going to talk about in a second. They were assigned to the Domestic Policy Council, which is actually one of the most powerful councils within the White House. And they, worked for a year on different projects. STEM education, for example, was a big issue during the Obama administration in the Office of in the Domestic Policy Council. So that's one option for you. Okay, here's the OSTP internships. And the OSTP internships are 3 times a year. They are unpaid. They're limited to 90 days. But they can be, great great career boosters, a really good way to learn things, meet people, lots of different things. As is often the case, there tend to be more applicants for the summer programs than for the programs in other times of the year. So if you're interested in this, then this is a good, it's sort of good to think about this. And we would go on the OSTP side, we'd have all these applicants. Again, you always look at like the match of the applicants to the skills we have. So just if you get rejected, it's not necessarily you, it's just maybe what you're working on is not that, it's not relevant to what goes on. So for example, I was working on a study early on advanced manufacturing. So I was looking to hope to see if any interns applied who knew anything about manufacturing or who are at least engineers. So they would have at least some context and background for those. So these are can be really good opportunities and career boost, and you learn a lot, again, if you can afford to live for 90 days in Washington without pay. Now, this is the more kind of the most elite of the White House positions, which is the White House fellowship programs. I've met people who got these who were scientists and engineers, and there's currently one I looked up that was appointed to OSTP. So if you have a scientific and technical background, you can get this. And I've had people make it to the finalist round, but didn't get the cigar at the end. So this is just like another comment in that these are very, very competitive positions. All of these are the internships, everything else, but definitely people like you have gotten them. So now I'm going to move into policy. So here's what's happening again right now. So I've just done a few of these just so you can see who the people are. But these are agency review teams. And so right now, all these teams for all these different offices are going out and talking to people to look at the status of each of these agencies. Now, right now, we're having somewhat of a challenge because the President Trump has basically said to the agencies, don't cooperate with the Biden transition team. However, they can still talk to lots of other people who know these. And so the reason I picked these was because for like DOE, Arun Majumdar is, because he's somebody that I've met. He used to be the head of ARPA-E, that's the Advanced Research Project Agency for Energy in the Obama administration. He, believe it was the first director of ARPA-E. Now he heads like a energy center at Stanford. Dan Arvizu, I'm so terrible at saying names. He used to be head of one of the big DOE national laboratories. So I thought that would give you an idea about who is actually on these agency review teams and the kind of people that are there. Now, this is the one here for OSTP. Pretty much everybody on this team is a OSTP staffer from the Obama administration. And some of you may have met some of them before, particularly Kay Kuzumi, because he used to be at, I guess he still is at AAAS, but he used to do the budget presentations for AAAS and run their activities. Erin Sulzman was actually one of those former interns. So she was an intern. She left, got her degree, came back, became a regular staff person at OSTP, and now she's on this review team. So she was like one of you, back when. So what are the review teams asking about? They're asking about these 4 priorities. These are the 4, like when I was talking about the first 100 days, these are the issues that the President-elect Biden plans to focus on during that first 100 days. It's these 4 issues. So I've just done a few excerpts of these related to science. Basically on COVID, listen to science. Listen to public health authorities. I know this is shocking. Next is economic recovery. Now, economic recovery is, more related to science technology than you might think because of the link between, say, manufacturing and innovation, clean energy innovations, and so forth. So here's some ideas for some of those bullets. And again, you can go to the webpage to read all of them. Here's some that I picked out for climate change that are related to infrastructure, transit, the power sector, and innovation. So if you're interested in, focusing on the policies, then these are what you should focus on. Things that are other topics and so forth, they'll come, but probably not till after this first 100 days. And so that's really, a good sort of way to think about it. Oh, sorry, I forgot this last one, which is racial equity. This one is about like higher education opportunities, equity and infrastructure and clean energy investments, and longstanding inequities in agriculture. Now, the interesting thing from my perspective is that for the students who have been in my classes, a lot of you have been working on some of these issues, right? So that means the topics that you're working on might be of interest to the Biden administration in terms of possible actions. So this is something called the Day One Project. This is new this year. This is a new idea that some folks came up with that I know, like the Federation of American Scientists is involved and several other organizations. But basically, anybody, including all of you, can propose an idea, and then those people will help you after you write the idea to get visibility for that idea. And so these are people who are, people basically like me, science, technology, policy wonks who can help you get your ideas to the right people. And I know at least one of my students, I don't know if she's on here or not. If so, just put yourself in chat. Got her idea selected for one of these activities. So I encourage you to really take advantage of this opportunity if you're able to. You can also, of course, just do op-eds in your papers, things like that. Those are also ways, but I thought this Day One Project was something you all would like to know about. So that's it for my presentation. I'll then move to questions. So please make sure you type them in, and then we'll go through as many as we can. I do want to mention the two classes we have coming up. So registration closes Monday for this one, which is on public policy analytical methods, including cost benefit analysis, risk analysis. And then for the level 2 class, which is public policy analysis, that one, I just opened registration for that, and it begins in January. The other one begins like right after Thanksgiving during that week. Okay, so with that, I am now going to go to questions. I'm going to start at the top here. Let's see. Yep. Oh, yeah, let me see. Okay, somebody looked like they have Sherpas. Oh, the people who help get folks confirmed. That would make a lot of sense. That's Tammy. Tammy, say hi, Tammy, wherever you're at, if you're able to. So Tammy was with me at
Hi, Tammy.
Yeah. Yeah, so Tammy was with me at OSTP. And so that might make sense. Oh yeah, I know we're saying they help to get the cabinet appointees nominees through the process, as Tammy points out. Okay, thank you for those of you who know this. Okay, then we have a link and so forth. Okay, yeah. Okay, so someone says it's terribly inefficient to have the setup phase take this long. Is there any way to make it more efficient and effective? And the answer is yes. And people have been urging this for as long as I can remember. Like I told you, I've worked on 2 reports on appointments, and not only the national academies, but many organizations. In fact, I believe there was even a bill to try to make the transition process more effective and efficient. And it comes down an awful lot to one of my three P's, which is politics. People, and now some things are really hard to control, and that is the vetting process and the security process. So vetting is super important, as we found out again during the Trump years, where some people were not vetted and did not last very long in the process. And it's really, if you're one of these political appointees or nominated for one of these political positions, you're really taking a chance because, you have to divest of things, of like investments, and you might have to like have somebody else run your company or whatever. So it's really, really challenging if you decide to take one of these like major presidential appointments. So the answer is yes, but I wish, likelihood is low. Okay, can you extrapolate? Well, actually, Greg, why don't you ask this? I'm trying to have people talk on their own. So Greg, where are you at?
Surely.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice to meet you. An interesting presentation. So yeah, you were outlining that you had been appointed to a Schedule C position, but said that you were offered a presidential appointee position, but you turned it down. Can you extrapolate on the difference? Like, why were you offered an appointee position when they approached you, presumably with the Schedule C in mind? So can you outline that for us, and like, should we anticipate something like that possibly happening?
Well, in my case, I was sort of in an unusual situation in that I was already a federal employee because I was working for the Congressional Research Service, which is a think tank for Congress. And so you can't work for two branches of government at the same time. And because I knew this was a term appointment, for me to take it, I would have to move from permanent civil service to the term appointment, which is 3 years. So I did myself take a chance that I could find a job after my time at the White House was up. And ideally, perhaps go back into the federal government side, because I already had my GS ranking and all these other kinds of things that are important in that world. And when I talked to my bosses at the Congressional Research Service, they said, okay, well, here's the deal. We can only take you back if you do it as a non-political Schedule C. We can't take you back if you're a political appointee. And that is because the Congressional Research Service is very hardcore on being neutral politically. And so that was a big difference, because a lot of people serve, like at OSTP, there's a lot of detailees, like I think Tammy was a detailee from other agencies. And, they can go back to their home agencies. But I was the very first person who had ever been hired to work full-time exclusively for PCAST. Again, this is the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. Before, it had been detailees, people detailed from the agencies. And that is because they really wanted a major focus on increasing the prestige of science, which was a concern after the Bush administration. So in terms of like payment and benefits and all that, that was all the same. But like I said, I was not, I intentionally was not political, because I had to be neutral for the jobs that I held prior to joining the White House. So it was just kind of like a career decision on my part. But in the end, I left Washington and became a professor at Carnegie Mellon. So, let me see here. Let me see. Should we wait to apply for career jobs in the Biden administration until Biden is inaugurated? No. You can apply. I would, if you like, for example, if you are interested in those positions I showed, I would apply for them today, because it takes a long time to get hired in the, when you're hired into the government. And then it takes a long time to go through the interview process and things like that. So if there's a particular agency position, a career job, I would go ahead and apply for it. Okay, so Leah, do you want to ask your question about Jefferson Fellows?
Oh, I was just offhand, and you were showing all the internships, which are really more geared towards the younger folks. Although the White House Fellows is for younger folks, right? Early career.
No, yeah, actually, no. Yeah, so I would say the White House Fellows are equivalent to the Jefferson Fellows at the State Department. Yeah, if you look at them, you'll see, I suggest like, if you, if you look at the, like put in like Google, like White House Fellows, class of 2021, and you'll see that these were people who were like department heads, things like that. They're actually, maybe the people look young, but they're people who, you know, are definitely mid-career. I would call them mid-career.
At this maybe 10 years ago, it said something about early career, but I'm glad to see they're a little more diverse.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call them, like I said, I think most of them were in their 30s or maybe even 40s, you know, so.
And fellows are more of a senior level folks from academic institutions.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, yeah, take a look, Leonie, you'll see, I think you'll agree with me.
Might
The bios.
the Presidential Innovation Fellows, which is more the senior level or mid-career senior level tech folks, they're also looking for folks now. So it would be a good time if people are interested in that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's other sort of fellowship programs. I was only focusing on primarily the White House ones.
So I was a Presidential Innovation Fellow under the Obama administration, and I worked every day with OSTP people. I mean, it's work hand in hand in that. So while you're not at OSTP, it was founded by OSTP, and there's a very close relationship.
With them. Okay, so that's good. Yeah, I'll add it to my list. Okay, so we have M from Salem asking about state level. Can you go ahead and ask your question? I do not see her. Maybe she. Oh no, I see you. So, Em, are you able to unmute to ask your question? Maybe she has to wait. So, well, her question is, what are the opportunities to connect from the state level with the White House agencies? At the moment, not much, I would say, other than through the actual departments and agencies and so forth. That might change this time, I think, and the reason why is because I think we've found through the pandemic that state agencies and state organizations are far more important than people ever really realized. I suspect that a lot of people did not even know who their governor was until the pandemic, and then they started seeing the governors make statements all the time. So at the moment, there's really, you know, again, just based on my Obama administration experience, there wasn't much, but I think there'll probably be more in the future. Okay, so Jake on navigation of agencies.
Hi there. Thanks for this really interesting talk. It's also been great to hear all these fellowships that people are mentioning, because I can kind of research them and then start reaching out to those folks and getting a sense of what they're doing. So that's been really helpful. Hopefully we'll have this presentation later to review. Yeah, I'm a current AAAS Congressional Fellow, and I'm thinking about applying for some of these jobs. Obviously, I'm looking to stick around for a while. And you're saying that it takes a while to be confirmed. When should we be applying to gain that? Our fellowship ends around August. You know, I wouldn't want to get offered the position when I'm still in the job. And if that were to happen, what happens at that point? So just generally navigating that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. So I actually had let me see if I can remember his career transition. So I had an intern, a White House intern, who was from Stanford. He already had his PhD, and he went back to Stanford and worked with somebody named Artie Beanstalk, who used to be in, I think, the Clinton OSTP. He then was an intern. Then he went and was a AAAS Congressional Fellow. And then he became, ended up working for the Secretary of Energy on a career position. And then he went to ARP-E and became, took a regular position there. And then he went to Chicago, and that's where he is now. So part of the point I was making about how long it takes for the presidential transition process is to realize that there's no rush to apply now. Because it's going to take a long time for first the Secretary of Energy to be named and get in place. So that will, whoever they're going to nominate for Secretary of Energy that will happen sometime in January at the latest, maybe even December. But then they still have to be confirmed. And as you saw, maybe from one of those charts I had, that's going to take like at least a month, maybe 2 months. Okay. Then you have all those assistant secretaries, right? And all those assistant secretaries are going to need staff who work for them, right? And that would be sort of like the position you would be in, like my former intern who kind of made that transition. So I typically tell people to start, I would start looking at open positions, 6 months before, at least 6 months before, because you're going to need to kind of scope things out. Like depending on your field and your agency, you're going to want to get a feeling for, what offices you might be interested in working for and what offices are having openings. And then, who's going to have, how their budgets are going and things like that. So it's going to take a fair amount of scoping. And during this stage, it's really important to do this kind of informational interviews, right? So informational interviews are basically when you go and you contact somebody who has a job that you want and say, I'm interested in having your job someday. Do you mind if we chat for coffee for 10 or 15 minutes or whatever it is? These days, it would be a Zoom chat. And a lot of people are willing to talk to you for those like 15 minutes, right? And just to kind of sort of help the next gen. Even better if there's some personal connection, somebody can give you an introduction. So introductions are always, like really key, an e-introduction. Or, maybe, like they went to Stanford, you went to Stanford, or whatever it might be. So I recommend scoping all the jobs all the time, like looking at USA jobs, getting on their email list so you can sort of see what's open, what, jobs as they open. The second part is to do informational interviews, again, throughout your fellowship, internship, whatever it is that you have. And then, it takes at least 2 months, I think, for any sort of federal position, from the time that it's opened till because it takes them at least a month that the positions are open. Then there's all this like very fancy, challenging interview process where they have to interview so many people, and then it has to go through like 5 layers. So it's a long process to get a federal job. So don't worry as much about applying too early, because you can always say, well, look, my internship, if you get as far as interview, you can say my internship or fellowship ends in August. So I wouldn't be able to begin to then, and they'll be fine with that almost positively, because they know how long it takes for people to get through just the interview hiring process. Some people have to move, all these different things.
So I should be like looking at February, March, start figuring out what positions are open, and try to have had some informational interview with people in that department ahead of time so I can tailor my application.
Exactly. Yeah. And find out if you're interested. It's a two-way street, You might find the people you work with are like the most important things. I should move on. I don't mind staying longer to ask questions, but I know some of you might have to sort of leave it set up.
Thanks so much.
Sure. Let me see. Our early career scientists typically, this is Kaylin. Kaylin, are you here?
Yeah.
There we go. Great. Oh, thank you. There I go. See you.
Yeah, my main question is just mostly for an early career scientist who's going to graduate with their PhD in a couple of years, is it worth it to try and build some background skills to pursue a policy analyst position for after I graduate, or should I more focus on the fellowships and different kinds of like training sorts of positions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as I sort of mentioned earlier, all these positions are super competitive. That being said, plenty of people, including me, go into these jobs without doing any fellowships or internships or anything of any kind, right? So, I would always say apply for both fellowships and regular jobs, and you might get a regular job. The jobs I was showing are like GS-13 levels. All of you could make the GS-13 level, probably a GS-12 level, because most of you have PhDs or will have PhDs at the time you apply. So entry and for some agencies, they really want entry level and they want to train you on the job. They're not expecting you to come in with necessarily a lot of knowledge. That being said, you know, you are going to compete with like Jake here, the one who's before you, who already, he's going to have completed his fellowship and has that congressional experience. So a lot of it really depends on the nature of it. But say if you're a specialist in, like I spent some time today on a topic I spent a lot of time, which is carbon dioxide reduction technologies. So, you know, if Jake does not have any background in these technologies, but you do because you've been working with somebody in, where were you at? In Ohio on that, you might well get hired, even though Jake has a fellowship, right? Because you might know more on that topic. And that is, that's already, you know, that's already one of the topics that has been identified as a focus, as a technology focus for the Biden administration. So, you know, you never know what's going to happen. So I always say apply for everything. Worst case scenario, you know, you got to do some rigmarole to get things to work and have multiple opportunities. But the reality is that there's a couple hundred people in the fellowship, the AAAS fellowship programs every year, and they graduate and they're all looking for the same kind of jobs. And, you know, it's just a competitive world out there. And that's why I also encourage people to look at the state level, because at the state level, you know, you actually have an edge at the state level, you know, because there's less people applying for those positions. And in my mind, at the state and local level is where like all the, you know, the really super interesting policy, most of it's happening at the state and local level these days, in my opinion, because that's where all the experimentation is going on and new things are happening. So, you know, of course, I want to be in Washington. Like I was in Texas, I was a field engineer. I came to DC, just like everybody does. Now that I'm in Pittsburgh, I appreciate this a bit more. So I understand, you know, about the desire to go there. So in any case, yeah, so you definitely could apply for those positions and just make sense. Oh yeah, so Sarah's saying there are 1 or 2 AAAS S&T fellows at OSTP now, but it's super competitive. Yes, I was the one who interviewed those people on my side, and it was hard. But I'll give you like another little example. So I was interviewing. So it was the first time that AAAS had, I mean, that, you know, OSTP/PCAST had a AAAS fellow. They were sponsored by the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. And I was interviewing 2 people who were interested. Of the 2 candidates, I picked one just because I like both of them, right? But one of them was like a bit more senior, so I thought she could handle, like when I talk, you know, have you heard the phrase herding cats? Well, when I was at the National Academies, I felt I was herding cats in terms of committee members. But when I was at PCAST, with those people, I call it herding tigers. And because, you know, these are hardcore people who are really super accomplished in science technology policy. So I thought, you know, maybe she would have an edge. Well, anyhow, the person I picked turned me down because she wanted to go to the State Department instead. So I instead picked the number 2 person, who again was equally good. And that person turned out to be a fantastic AAAS fellow. She moved from being a fellow to going on the regular OSTP staff. Then she became the executive director of, or maybe the deputy director, I can't remember sure, of one of the other councils in the White House. And then guess who she ended up working for? Biden. She worked for Biden on the cancer initiative. So there you go. You know, it shows like, you know, one little thing can make a big difference. But like I said, it is, you know, like super, super competitive. Yeah, this is about the Revelle Fellow. I think that they still have those. Yeah, there's stuff about the Innovation Fellows, so you guys can look there for the link. Okay, so this is M again, and she was asking about the useful paths for mid or late career scientists to move into policy analyst work. So one thing that people don't know about the AAAS fellowship program, which I, by the way, don't necessarily always agree with, is that you can be a mid-career person or late career, and you can apply for all those AAAS fellowships. And you know, they do get you get hired. Plus, I would encourage you to apply for the state fellowship programs, which also are just burgeoning, and they are also, they're also a good way to do it. And then again, you can just get hired. So buy an agency and kind of learn. What I always say is, if you can only get hired on the technical side, then go ahead and get hired there, and then tell people you want to work in policy. And I've had plenty of people use that as a method to move from technical to policy. It might not be policy generally is not always an entry level position, but it can make sense. Oh my goodness, I have lots of messages here. Lots of things here. Okay, so links. Let me see. So this is M again. To what extent is policy work a blend of quantitative and qualitative analysis? How does a person with quantitative analysis develop qualitative skills? And the answer is, you got to do a lot of reading, and I always recommend that people take classes, take just a class on policy analysis, and you'll sort of see what the difference is. Let me see. Okay, I think we actually made it through everything, and we're actually only 3 minutes over. Amazing. Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming to this week's, this month's webinar. I hope you found it interesting. I do always appreciate comments in terms of how to improve things for the future. I will post the video of this again on our YouTube channel, and I'll also post the slide deck on the SciTech Policy Academy.com website. So you'll see those there if you're interested in taking a look at those. But if not, until next time, and please, if you enjoyed this, sign up for whatever we end up doing for the next webinar for December. Everybody, open up your mic and say bye so I can hear you all.
Thanks, Deborah. That was really interesting. Bye.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.